Negative 39 degrees in Cornish, Maine. We were driving home, and it was negative 39 degrees, and it was blowing wind. And I'm like, this is going to really suck tomorrow because I'm pretty sure our car is going to be grounded because the storm's coming in. We probably shouldn't be driving right now. And so the very next day, we were walking around. It was negative 20s, and we knock on people's door, and they'd be like, "It's cold. Go inside." I'm like, "We're trying. Let us in." So that's probably the most extreme of that end. And then the extreme of the other end was in Ellsworth, Maine. It got up to 105, and we had no AC, and it was like 95% humidity. So it was awful. If you're going to any cold mission and you're going in summer, don't get your winter clothes where you're at, because winter clothes in Utah is not winter clothes in New England. Because how often do we see negative 39 degrees here? So you might be in, Mesa, Arizona, buying a winter coat that you think is going to be good, but when you get to New England, all of a sudden it's not good enough. Plus, the other thing is a lot of the missionaries, when they leave the mission, they will leave their winter coats, especially if they live in southern climates. They'll leave their coat at the mission office. And so the mission office will help missionaries who come in to outfit for winter, or they'll tell them the best places to buy it for cheap. So that's one thing that, like, I saw a lot of missionaries were thankful they did, is when they came out during the summers, they brought the money that they needed to. They could buy all the winter clothes on a P-Day. But then they saw what they already had there, and they're like, well, I already got a wool coat. Might as well use that one and not spend $400 or $200, whatever you're going to spend on a wool coat. So I'd say that would be the biggest thing. And then I'd say the other big thing is, think about, do you really need that on your mission? Are you really going to use that on your mission? Because I saw so many things that I'm like, I never actually use it on my mission. It's a big bulky clock. Why did I have that? Or different things where mission gives you an opportunity to simplify your life, and it's expensive to ship things home. And so you might as well do some trial and error and make sure that you can actually pack your bag, because if your mom or your sister packs your bag to get to the MTC and then you can't get it all back in to get on the airplane, you're going to run into some problems. And then along the way, you're going to want to buy souvenirs and stuff, so make sure you have enough room not used that you can bring stuff from area to area. I'd say the hardest one was I was in a trio. It was learning to work with two companions, because learning how to work with one person is hard enough, but being thrown into a trio and having two companions, that was probably the hardest experience of my mission, was learning first to tolerate them, then to get over my grievances with them, and then to learn how to love them and to try to serve them, especially because with a trio, you're not going to stay around for more than one transfer, maybe two if you're lucky. And so with most companionships, you're like, who knows, we may be together. I was with my trainer for 6 months. It was worth it to invest in that relationship. That one, I'm like, we're going to be together 5 more weeks. If I can just endure to the end, I'll make it through. But learning how to love them and become friends with them. Lobster, it was the best food. We had lobster one day, and the member took us down to the dock, and the guy is there, and he's like, "Oh, I got your order ready." We walked down onto the pier, down to basically this floating barge thing in the ocean, and he then starts pulling up these boxes full of lobster, and we're like, "This is fresh." And he's like, "Oh yeah, this is the fresh stuff." And we had clam bake, which was clams that were done correctly, and so they tasted good, not gritty. And then we had lobster, and they're like, "You're gonna eat 2 or 3 lobsters, right?" And I'm like, I can barely finish one of these. These are huge." And so that was probably the most exotic and the best food I had on my mission. And so that was trippy. The atonement's real. And if you want it to be real for you, you need to let it be real for other people. And that if you want to seek forgiveness from him, you got to let other people seek forgiveness from you. I definitely learned that when I was in Bangor, Maine, with my trio. At the very end, we had a really hard companionship, and we came together and we made amends. We could have left, and we would have been bitter foes to this day. But instead, we made amends, and we used the atonement, and now I'm friends with both of those companions. I'd say probably the crazy experience was we were sitting there in Sharon, Vermont, and we had this lady show up, and she's like, "So we're going to do a marathon for the memorial." And we're like, "What?" And it was like this whole crazy thing going on. We just kind of like, "Hey, we're not going to get involved with this, and you're trying to arrange it with the missionary department and all this stuff. Well, we end up getting a phone call from our mission president saying, okay, here's the deal. We're going to be you're going to help out with the marathon. We're like, we are? And so we were there passing out water for the marathon. And one of the people we were teaching wanted to come visit us while we were passing out water. So he drove his car up. And when he left, he peeled out. And the person's house is, their house and their field is right next door, heard it. And they thought it was us. And they saw our car parked right there. And so he came outside and shot his gun in the air and then pointed at us. He's like, next time it's you. And we're like, what in the world? And all these runners are like, dude, did you hear those gunshots? We're like, this is intense. And then 35 minutes later, the cops show up. And they're like, we heard you're harassing people. And we're like, what? Like, yeah, he called and said you were harassing us. And we're like, did he mention he shot a gun and threatened to kill us? And he's like, he shot a gun? And we're like, yeah. He goes, you gotta come down to the station. And we're like, we can't leave the water station. This is a mile marker 25. These people need water now more than ever. And he goes, fine. Once the marathon's done, I want you to come down to the station and fill out these forms talking about all this stuff that happened. And we're like, he's like, are you gonna want to press charges? I'm like, no, we don't even want to go down to the station. We just want to pass out water and go do normal missionary work. They leave, and literally 5 minutes later, the Jehovah's Witnesses drive up and they're like, here, you need this. They had us in a wake. I'm like, this is the craziest thing that has ever happened to us. We got threatened to get killed. The cops called on us by the person who threatened to kill us. And then we have the Jehovah's Witnesses giving us an awake saying, here, you need to be saved. And we're like, what is going on here? Best part of the day, though, is when we got the leftovers from the marathon. They gave us a 5-gallon tub of Ben & Jerry's ice cream. And we're just like, yes, God is good. Best mission prep advice I could give would be to learn the gospel and live the gospel, especially reading the Book of Mormon cover to cover. The second half of my mission, I trained or retrained missionaries the entire time, and almost none of them had read the Book of Mormon cover to cover. And that was something that was unreal to me because homeschooled, we learned it. That's how I learned how to read. I'm like, what do you mean you've never read the Book of Mormon? And so they spent the first couple months of their mission almost catching up to where they should have been. They were trying to read the Book of Mormon for that first time, trying to get that testimony. And I just, it just kind of really firmly in place in my mind that that's something that every missionary should do before the mission. The time to get a testimony is now. The time to take those things out, to learn to love the gospel is now. You're going to develop a deeper understanding far more on your mission. But if you actually start now, you're actually going to start your mission on your feet compared to starting your mission having a crisis of faith. One of the members actually asked us to come up. It was the Gary family in Denmark, Maine. They live up near the woods. And they're like, here, come over, do some service, and then help us skin a deer. We're like, what? And we get there, we're like, so you shot a deer? And they're like, oh, not yet. We're going to shoot it tonight. I'm like, what do you mean you're going to shoot it tonight? And we went, and their son shot a deer that night. And they're like, okay, let's go grab the deer. And we dragged it out of the forest and put it in the truck. And then we drove it down to the weighing station. We had the entire experience of shooting. Well, we didn't shoot it, but weighing a deer, skinning the deer, and all these different things. And we're just like, it was one of the most intense things I'd ever done as a missionary. And I'm pretty sure the people at the game office were like, what are these Mormon missionaries doing with this deer? And we're like, trust us, we're wondering that too. Dealing with people. Being homeschooled, it definitely was probably the people skills. I remember my trainer would always be every weekly planning, I'm like, so what can I do better at? And he'd write down the same word, and he'd slide it over to me on a piece of paper. And I'm like, yes, I'm working on being tactful, I know. He goes, you just can't call people out like that sometimes. They gotta feel your love, otherwise they're just gonna hate you. And I'm like, did I lie? And he goes, no, but just because it's the truth doesn't mean you necessarily need to deliver it that way. And so I'd say it was the art of showing the person that I love them and then correcting them. But tactfully being able to share the gospel and do that, that was probably the biggest skill I learned. I see that, I love it when I teach the gospel, gospel doctrine. Come out of the lesson and I ask the people I taught, how did it go? And one of them was like, I felt rebuked. I'm like, but a good rebuked. I want to do better. I normally don't feel rebuked. That's a gospel doctrine. But I want to do better. I'm like, looks like I learned the lesson of being tactful enough. You're not offended, so boom, gold.